All right, Jesse on fire. Welcome back to the channel. Now let's talk about Rafael Dos Anjos because he had a hell of a night last night, huh? He had a hell of a night last night. Paul Felder is game. He looked good like he always does, and Rafael Dos Anjos looked really good. I mean, really, really, really good. He was dominant. Can you guys believe? Now, for those of you who didn't see the fight, you know, maybe you're tuning in here to hear about it. But for those of you who saw it, can you believe that one of the judges gave that fight to Paul Felder? Like that was bananas. And Michael Bisping was like, "Yeah, I don't, nothing against Paul Felder, but I think whatever judge scored it for Paul Felder needs to find a new job." And the only thing I can think of is like maybe they were checking the wrong boxes. Like they were on the Paul Felder side thinking they were on the RDA side, because there's no rational person who could have scored that fight for Paul Felder if they know one thing about fighting. But anyway, RDA. So this is what I wanted to talk about. So obviously the main news today, as it normally is anytime there's an event, is RDA called out Conor and Conor accepted, right? It's ridiculous, okay? I'll tell you, first of all, it's ridiculous because Conor said Dustin's first, right? Dustin's first. But then, yeah, let's rock and roll, RDA. And I see what he's doing because Conor is in this weird spot where he couldn't get a fight, during this last year. And now he's like, I want to make sure I have fights. Like, I want to be fighting in 2021, so he's trying to line him up. But he knows RDA's not next. What scenario? I mean, I assume he is planning to beat Dustin. And in what scenario where he beats Dustin is Rafael Dos Anjos next for him? I mean, seriously, like Rafael Dos Anjos, he looked great last night, but that's his first fight at 155 in a long time. And Conor, if he beats Dustin, like I'm sure he's expecting to do, he's fighting Tony, Gaethje, Khabib, or maybe Michael Chandler, obviously, which again, it just aggravates me when he just keeps saying he says yes to every fight. He says yes to every fight. And it's like, the whole thing with Conor that was so awesome was he always did what he said. He said he's going to do this, he'd go do it. If he says he's going to fight that day, he's going to fight that day. And it's like now he just kind of like, sure, I'll fight him. It's just, anyway. But let's talk about RDA. So what I wanted to do when they said, RDA said, hey, Conor, let's fight. Conor responded, sure. And I was like, well, let's just, and I know RDA has been in welterweight for a while. I wasn't really sure like exactly how many fights he had at welterweight. He had 8 fights at welterweight and went 4-4. So I looked at what his history was prior to that at 155. I mean, obviously I knew he was the champion at 155 and lost to Eddie Alvarez. But like, so prior to moving up to 170, this is what his last few fights look like. So he beat Mark Bocek, Evan Dunham, then he beat Cowboy, then he lost to Khabib, then he beat Jason High, then he beat Benson Henderson, then he beat Nate Diaz, then he beat Anthony Pettis, then he beat Donald Cerrone, and then he lost to Eddie Alvarez, and then he lost to Tony Ferguson, and then he went up. Now, a couple things. So, I mean, he's a legit 155-pound fighter, man. Like, I thought that he went on a longer lose streak than that before he went up to welterweight. But he lost to Eddie Alvarez, who's obviously solid. And that's a fight. He got caught, but he could certainly have beaten Eddie Alvarez. And then he lost to Tony Ferguson, I mean, who's an utter savage, right? And that was part of, a win streak for Tony that was almost unequaled in UFC history. So there's nothing to, like, hang your head over in those fights, right? And so some people are just better in different weight divisions. I mean, that's just the way it is. But the other thing, so let me just finish that point. So he's a legit contender at 155. Just, plain and simple, he just is, right? He looked great last night. He looked like a contender. He looked like a guy that, you stick him in there with Michael Chandler. Certainly Michael Chandler. I don't know who's going to win that fight. But it also brought me back to the fact that Khabib beat him in 2014, okay? So Khabib beat him in 2014, part of his unbeaten streak, which brings me back to the conversation about Jon Jones and his pedigree and the number of title defenses that he had. And it's like, so Khabib beat the future champion in 2014, and Rafael Dos Anjos became the champion the following year. So basically my point is Khabib could have been champion for an additional 4 years. I mean, he never lost. He wouldn't have lost to any of the guys he fought. So he would have had an additional 4 years of being champion had he gotten a title shot earlier. I mean, that's kind of like the point that I was making. Because like before, he had trouble making weight, and then he was getting injured and stuff, and so I'm sure Dana was concerned about giving him a title shot. But like, in terms of his skill set, he beat Rafael Dos Anjos right before Rafael Dos Anjos became the champion, and I don't think that anybody would pick, Eddie Alvarez or any of the guys that came subsequent over Khabib. So Khabib would have had a really long title run. But anyway, neither here nor there. Rafael Dos Anjos did not have a bunch of losses at 155 before he went up. So as far as I'm concerned, he's a legit contender. I mean, he lost to Eddie Alvarez, who was in his prime, and then he lost to Tony Ferguson, and in a decision, a hard-fought decision. So I don't know, man. I think you give him the loser of Conor and Dustin. That seems to make sense to me. I can't see giving him a Gaethje fight yet. Maybe Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker would be a good test for him. Because he's like right in that area that's just outside. As far as I would measure it, he's just outside those top guys, which are Conor, Khabib, well, assuming Khabib's still there, Conor, Khabib, Ferguson, Gaethje, and then Chandler's this weird little outlier. But I think he's fighting Ferguson anyway. We're going to find out what he's got. So anyway, that's what I've got. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, tell your friends.